never been to one of these house events. Yeah, kind of fun.
How are you doing? Good. Hello. Shoes are kind of down this way and that way, and coats were starting to stack up in the piano room. I have to give you something too. Do you ever need that quotation for you? We've got the check for it. Oh, okay. So let me. I'm sorry.
If you'd like to sign in and make yourself a name tag, that would be great. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, you have a sleepy
Oh, and then the realtor said, "Oh, we'll wait 24 hours in case any more offers come in," and it was over the weekend.
We got some door pounding to do. But if they do know one, make all the When you come over here,
Let's do that.
absolutely love it because it's one thing to read it, another thing to read it. That's cool. Nice.
So we'll get everyone down. Yeah.
So I'll let you, yeah, absolutely.
Hi. Renita, nice to meet you. Hi, you're Angie. You're
Anya.
Anya.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Nice to meet you, Sue. Angie's campaign, too?
Yeah.
No, I'm just here.
You just live in the district then? Yeah. Oh, wow. Well, I'm running on the A side, 56A, Renita Fisher. Yes. Yes, I'm running with, to be the endorsed candidate for Burnsville Savage area. So,
Very cool.
yes, I'm super excited. Super excited. Nice to meet you, Anya.
You do.
Yeah, no problem.
I don't know.
How's it going?
Must be a city requirement there.
I think it's a city ordinance.
And then,
How are you? Well, it's like Scott said, we'll do one of these months. Okay, we'll do one. Very lucky, very lucky.
Nice to meet you.
Yes, you too. You too as well.
Yeah. You'll never say never.
Right. You look so familiar.
I'm Anya, by the way.
Hi, I'm Mara.
Mara, I'm Anya.
Nice to meet you.
And you?
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Are you from the neighborhood? Oh, nice. That's great.
Just kind of following the
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad you're doing it. I'm really excited. Yes, I'm her manager. Funny term, but yeah.
Well, I suppose, yeah, but they're like talent managers.
Sure. Yeah, basically I'm her driver. That's pretty much what it is. Driver from stop to stop. Yeah, we're always excited to do stuff like this.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, get her off the phones a little bit.
Well, it's kind of fun being like in somebody's house. It feels like
Yeah.
cool.
Doesn't it?
I've got. It's really nice. It's my first one.
Yeah. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too. Well, he's not Isaac's now. So we're all set up. Have you ever been on a tour at the Minnesota State Capitol? I work for the Historical Society. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
You see a lot of faces there.
Yeah, we do. I know.
to go to the Historical Society a lot.
Okay.
But that was like a few years ago.
Okay. I worked for them for a long time. So. I don't know. It could just be one of those like friendly face, Yeah. So you're kind of just learning more about getting involved, or school projects.
I consider myself as being fairly involved in politics for a while, but because of my age, I can't actively do anything.
Yeah. Hey, but today there were, thousands of kids, high school kids, that were there advocating, for gun laws and stuff. So, yeah, and that's
we want to really give Angie some time to chat a little bit here. But first of all, I got to tell everybody that I'm really feeling three things right now. First of all, I'm feeling just incredibly grateful for everybody to take the time and come and hear Angie and meet Angie. And just thank you so much for taking the time to do that. I'm also feeling really, really lucky because, as you know, that there's a lot of positions in Congress that we need to take control of, and aren't we lucky to have someone as outstanding, spectacular as Angie to be our candidate for that spot. And I'm feeling hopeful. I'm really feeling hopeful for what might happen this election season, but I am not naive to the fact that Angie's running against an incumbent, by the way, and the power of incumbency is something that we have to take pretty seriously because all of those emails that go out to constituents every single week and repeat that message makes a formidable candidate, whether we like it or not. So, we really, and I've said to Angie, we talked a lot about this 2%. The difference in the last election, she corrects me, she says 1.85, Scott.
1.79.
79. Exactly. Okay. So I want to tell you what my theme is. Win by 5. We got to win by 5 so that we know that we're going to win. Okay. So that's really my hope and the hopeful part. And so, I just got to tell you before I let Angie have the stage here that there's some really, if you think of the reasons why we, and why I personally support Angie, you'd think, well, let's start with something that probably has hit us all here recently, and that's issues of gun control, right? And so the country has become completely unreasonable, and I love the way Angie stands for reasonable, common sense gun control. You think about what's happened with the environment, where we've got someone today who is leading the Environmental Protection Agency. It's under complete attack. I love our natural resources, And I want Angie there to protect it, and I know she will, because that's what she stands for. And I think about our schools, and I think about just the craziness that's gone on, talking about arming teachers with guns instead of arming them with tools. You know, we've got to change that for sure. And so when I think about all of these things that contribute, the one thing that I think about the most is we have got to take our democracy back. I mean, I don't know about you, but Barb and I do a debrief every night, and we feel like we are losing our democracy. So we need a government that, frankly, does a couple of things. And I think under Angie's leadership and the support that she'll give to the rest of Congress, we'll get this. We need a government that, very frankly, will support a free press and not call the press the enemy of the people. We need a government that will support the different branches within the government, including, of course, our judiciary system. And, you know, we need a government that tells us the truth. And isn't that really where it's all about? And so, with all of these things, it's probably just incredibly clear, but that's why I am all in our family, we say, the full Monty. We are all in for Angie Craig.
So much for showing up here tonight. This tells me so much about how much you care, as well about the direction of the country. Barb, Scott, thank you so much for doing this. I'm the candidate, so I get candidate's prerogative here. I want to introduce you to someone else, because this election season is not just about beating Jason Lewis, although I am the woman who's going to beat Jason Lewis in 2018. A wonderful House candidate to come and introduce herself, because we have to not just care about these seats in Congress, but we have to care about these House seats and these Senate seats all around this state if we want good decision making across this community. So I want to introduce my friend Renita Fisher. I went to something with another candidate. When they asked me to come speak, I was so grateful for an opportunity. So, Renita, please.
Oh, Angie, oh my goodness. Hi, good evening, everybody. I see a room full of such friendly faces, and I'm so glad I'm here. But I would be remiss if I didn't talk about how much this woman has impressed on me, and how much I'm emotional talking about it, about how much seeing you on the campaign trail has been an inspiration for me. I remember one of the very first times I stepped up to be a community activist, one of the first people that I sat down to have coffee with when we started a grassroots organization called Stand Up Citizens. And we sat across the table from you, and I remember we peppered you with questions after the loss that November, and you were so brave and you were so strong. And one of the things that you said is, I'm running again, don't tell anybody.
To a group of 5.
And I left that event, and I'm going to admit, I told everybody around me. And I am so glad, and I know you'll be an awesome person representing us and being our voice out in Washington, D.C., and I can't wait to celebrate with you in Hollywood. So my name is Renita Fisher, and I've lived in Burnsville now almost half my life. I was born in a tiny, impoverished country called Guyana. It's in South America. And I remember when I first came here to Minnesota, I came with nothing but an education. But I remember the obstacles that I had in getting that education as a child. Growing up in an impoverished country, once you are touched by poverty, it's something you never forget. Even though my dad had a career as a diplomat, he was also a single dad. And a lot of times when he traveled, my grandparents were the ones who raised us. So on occasions when my dad was going to be gone for long times, he would take us on those trips with us. If he was going to be gone for 2 years, we were there to be raised, and help my dad in whatever way he needed and go to school. So I got to experience life around the world. But when we went back to Guyana, he went back to poverty, and I will never forget that. Some days we didn't know where our next meal was going to come from, and we did homework by candlelight. But one of the things that was important on us as kids, that straight A's were expected, no matter the obstacles. And when I came to Minnesota, I'm so glad for that experience and what it imparted on me, because that was what got me to be successful here. I found a community that was about support, it was about love, it was about lifting each other up. And I took that with me. So when the school district sent out a call for parents to come and volunteer for the Finance Advisory Committee, I answered that call. I've been in mortgage banking operations and management for 16 years. And I stepped forward and I said to the school district, what can I do? And my very first meeting that I went to, what I saw was frightening practically. The cracks in the foundation for financial funding for our schools, it's in jeopardy. And if we don't do anything about it, the problem gets worse and we fail our kids. I've got a 13-year-old in the school system. And I realized I couldn't just not do anything, and I decided to run. What we need to do is to make sure that we've got funding and closing those gaps, especially when it comes to special education. Right now we're looking at a $700 million gap between state and federal funding and the subsidies that we need. So Angie, I'm going to be knocking on your door as much as I can. So while we currently have a representative who wants to focus on writing bills for reality TV stars, I want to say, what can we do for our kids? How can we keep them safe from gun violence? How can we make sure they've got food on the table? How can we make sure they've got a affordable roof over their head? How can we do those things? And to me, those are the practical, everyday things that we can do for our kids. And that's what I want to run for. So again, I'm going to be asking for your support, those of you who live in the district, to help us turn this from red to blue. And I'm saying I'm the best person to position to do that, because as a moderator with Better Angels, I've been talking to Republicans and Democrats to say, how can we come together to get decisions done? And that's what I've been doing for the last year and a half. So what I say is, help me win that endorsement, and I ask for your support, and let's do this. Let's win this.
As I said, I am the woman who is going to be Jason Lewis in 2018. God, now I see you here too. I can see you. All right, I promise you'll be last. How about that?
That's how it should
All right, good. Yeah, that's how it should be. We got another candidate for the House seat over here. So, all these candidates. So, I want to tell you tonight just a little bit about myself, because I think it helps you understand, perhaps, why I want to run for this seat in Congress and why I feel so strongly that we need a voice in this country. For those of you who are here tonight, I'm just so proud at how many of you who have stood up over the last 12 months across this country. Some of you perhaps have been involved for years in the party. Some of you may be new to politics. How many of you have ever volunteered for a campaign? It's a lot of new people in this room, and that is fantastic, because this is a moment in time in our country where I feel very strongly that we are off course in so many ways. A lot of people ask me, why do I want to serve in this Congress? I grew up in a mobile home park. My mom was a single mom who worked 2 jobs to help support us while she put herself back through college. It took my mom almost 10 years to get her college degree and become a teacher. She couldn't have done that if my grandmother hadn't moved 3 doors down and helped care for those 3 little kids so that my mom could go back to school and get that college degree. I had to do the same thing. I had to go to college, a state school. I had 2 choices, this state school or that state school. And I worked 2 jobs. I worked at McDonald's, I worked at the local shoe store, and I had to save up the money each semester to be able to go the next semester when I was a young person. 25 years ago in this country, okay, maybe a little older than that, you could do that in this country. We could work during the summer, we could save up our money, and we could go to school and stay in school almost continuously. That's completely disappeared in this country. And we know that that is a huge problem that we need to tackle. I've been really lucky. Out of college, I worked for about 5 years as a newspaper reporter. In fact, the guy standing behind me is not a Republican tracker. Just to be clear, the first thing I said, I do have trackers who follow me around in the community from time to time in public places, but we would never let them in a private home. But Lance worked with me at the Commercial Appeal newspaper all those years ago, and he's decided to come in town over the next 4 days and for some reason a documentary on me. would be an interesting thing to do. And so I haven't decided whether he gets to see me wake up in the morning. I don't know, it's like the scariest thing for women, just let me tell you. But I spent 5 years working as a newspaper reporter, and then over the next 15 years, I worked my way up 2 medical manufacturing companies. And I can tell you, I know how lucky I am. I was on the senior leadership team of a Fortune 500 company before I stepped off 2 years ago to run for Congress. In that final job at St. Jude, where I worked, I had responsibility for 18,000 employees in about 100 countries, and 3,500 of those jobs were right here in Minnesota. Since that time, I ran for Congress. We'll get back to that in a minute. And I've now joined as a part owner of a startup company in St. Paul called Structural. We have 12 employees, and we just hit $200,000 in revenue. It's a little smaller than the $6 billion company that I worked for the last 12 years. But nonetheless, each of those experiences has taught me a lot about making sure that you have a great workplace and you have great jobs. So when I give a stump speech, I usually, get all rowdy and wild. But the truth is tonight, what I want you to know about me is that, I've had to fight. And I feel like this is where we are in this country right now. We've got to fight for the things that we believe in. I fought my way out of that mobile home park. I fought my way through college. I will never have a greater fight than the one I faced 20 years ago, though. There was another state that thought because my son Josh had 2 moms, that perhaps we shouldn't adopt him. And so for 3 years, I got up every single morning not knowing if that was the last day that I would put my son to bed that night. Once you face that, nothing scares you. And sure as hell not Republicans. Because they don't even make sense anymore when they talk. And it's once you face those kinds of fights. So I'm ready to fight. And what I'm ready to fight for is to get the pettiness out of our politics again. To get back to some common sense in this country, for God's sake. We're not living in a reality TV show. We are trying to help each other in community and make sure that good public policy leads in this country. And so what am I going to fight for as a member of Congress? Good jobs. And the job skills that employers need to fill those jobs. Steve back there, he runs a company. And he's going to need the right job skills for the jobs that he's going to have. And so what do we need to do about that? That, to me, is a core issue in our campaign. Affordable health care. Whose health care costs have gone down in the last 5 years? I grew up in a family without access to health insurance for a good bit of my childhood. And I remember when my little sister got sick and went into the hospital and the bills piled up and my mom had to negotiate with the hospitals and the providers. And I spent 22 years in healthcare. So I think rather than having someone who spent 22 years peering into a microphone in Jason Lewis, we would probably be better off with someone who spent 22 years working in healthcare. I mean, the good news out of 2016 is that Donald Trump now understands that healthcare is complicated. That's the one good thing that's happened. But they still haven't figured out how in the world to solve the crisis we're in on healthcare costs in this country. And I really do believe I have something important to add to this conversation. Making sure that we focus on education, both our public school system and our post-secondary system, and making sure that we have a route for everybody. I've got 3 kids in college, by the way. 2 of them are in traditional 4-year universities right now, and one is doing a CNC advanced manufacturing program at a community college. And every path is not the same for every kid, and we've got to recognize that again in our public school system. The other thing that I feel very, very strongly about, and this is coming from probably the kid from the trailer park, because I was there the last time we tried trickle-down economics in this country. That's where I live. And I can tell you not a bit of that trickled down to my family. Not a bit of it. We have got to push forward real tax reform
that benefits working families and small businesses in this country. This tax scam that was just passed, and I know if you have pass-through income or you're a sole business owner, maybe you were a little bit benefited from this, but I'm telling you, we lit a match to income inequality in this country when we passed that tax bill. We have to have common sense gun reform in this country. We just have to. I'm sending my kids to 4 of the highest risk places to be shot every single day of their lives. And we have to understand that there are some things that we can do. And then finally, I've been running now for about 3 years, not consecutively. But I can tell you, we have got to do something about our campaign finance system. And we've got to do something about the revolving door of conflicts of interest in this Congress. And so, if you go on my website today, you will see. I would obviously sign up to sponsor the constitutional amendment that would ban Citizens United. I'll return it. But that's not going to happen. I mean, we've got to be realistic here. We would need the ratification of the states for a constitutional amendment. So what's the second best thing? Transparency, sunshine, disclosure. Who, what corporate money is paying for those ads? We should be able to vote with our pocketbooks if all else fails. I will never profit from my representation from you. And as such, I believe we should ban all members of Congress from ever serving as lobbyists in any organization. Because if you're going to go represent our community, you shouldn't be doing it to get ahead for yourself. You should be doing it because you really want to help the people in your community. I promise you this. In 2016, in a Republican wave year, in a seat that we haven't held in 24 years, the 2nd Congressional District, just think about that. Somebody asked me a minute ago, do you think we can win? Well, just remember, people are conditioned to vote Republican in this district. They have held that seat for 24 years now. But in a Republican wave year, we got within 1.79, and I'd go get the other digit if I could right now. We almost won. We ran the 3rd closest race in the country in 2016. Does anyone here think it's going to be an average midterm turnout among Democrats? No, it's not going to be average. It's going to be above average. There is absolutely no doubt in my mind that in 2018, we break the cycle. In 2018, should I have the privilege to represent you one more time, we will win this seat, and we will change the course of this country together. So thank you so, so much. It's my favorite format because I get to answer questions. So, take a few questions. Colin, can we do that? Where are you? Never mind. Oh, I don't. It's usually where the staff goes back in the back and starts eating, so I'm just keeping them on. Yeah, okay. Any questions? Yes, sir.
One on healthcare. Everybody talks about, the single payer. The biggest issue I find in healthcare, it's all about the cost. Why does healthcare in this country consume almost 19% of the GDP? When you go to any of the other 11 industrialized countries of the world, and they provide better healthcare at a fraction of the cost, almost half. It's all about cost. And unfortunately, nobody wants to take a pay cut.
Well,
how do you address that?
That was
issue?
always the problem with the ACA. It only addressed access. Right? 24 million more Americans had access. And of course, that was a noble cause. But what we did is we got 24 million Americans access to health care that costs too much. So we know comparatively that the price of pharmaceutical drugs in other countries is substantially lower. We know that Medicare should be negotiating with pharmaceutical companies, just as they already do at the VA or Medicaid. But yet, pharmaceutical companies have cut deals with Congress over the years for no negotiation. We know that if we allowed reimportation of drugs from Canada, exact same dosage approves, that those drugs are 30-50% of what we pay here in the United States. The truth is this. Here's the truth. coming from someone who worked in healthcare all these years. America's paying for the innovation technology for the entire world. That's what's happening. Americans are paying for the innovation and the profit margins for companies for the entire world right now. Well, Japan's helping, but we won't go into that. But Medicare, it's interesting you raise Medicare because Medicare is actually, it's not a single payer, right? It doesn't cover today. It's not, no dental, no vision. You still need a Part D plan. It's not full coverage. And so I think, you know, what I would like to see is a focus on who works in health insurance here. Yeah, I knew I was going to get myself in trouble. I'm so in trouble, Jeff, I know. But we've got to find a way. We've got to find a way to cut down on administrative costs. We've got to find a way to get back to efficiency. We have one of the most inefficient ways of communicating medical records, which leads to duplicative services. If you change hospitals or change systems or change doctors, we're not regulating a lot of those things in the United States, and they do elsewhere. Medicare, I think there are 12 regional MAC systems in Medicare. So Medicare actually pays different reimbursement rates depending on what country that you live in. And so I think we can get to universal health care, but the truth is, and that's where I'd like to go, I think we're going to have to get creative. I think we're going to have to do something that is uniquely American, perhaps something that more resembles Germany than resembles Canada. Germany is a mix of what's called a DRG payment system, similar to Medicare payment reimbursement rates and a public system. Canada actually didn't become a single payer system. They went province by province as they became fully universally insured in Canada. So I think there's more work to be done. I would love to support a universal health care plan. I just haven't seen the one that's smart enough that gets us from 1/6, and you're right, Steve, this is horrible, and this is the challenge for policymakers. 1/6 of the U.S. economy is tied to health care, for-profit health care. Do you know how many hundreds of thousands of jobs are tied to 1/6 of the U.S. economy? So as we transition ourselves to universal care, we have to do it in a thoughtful way, or we will send this country into a depression. I'm not exaggerating. I had fiduciary responsibility for the healthcare plan at St. Jude Medical. We are self-insured, meaning we paid Blue Cross Blue Shield to do our administration, but we paid for the cost of our employees' health care. We spent $120 million just in this country. We had employees in Canada, in Germany, in Sweden, in South America. And so I've seen how each of these systems works. And if I were designing it from scratch, I'd probably design a Canadian-style system. But unfortunately, we live in reality where we're not designing it from scratch. And now we have to be thoughtful to transition to where we need to be. But you're right, the missing link was cost.
It's the white elephant in the room.
Well, and if you're running a business, who here runs a business or has kind of visibility into healthcare cost at your business? Yeah, so the biggest thing that was growing in our health plan on cost were cost of pharmaceutical drugs, compound drugs, specialty drugs, and it was really almost impossible to control because they've become so arrogant that they truly believe that we can't touch them. And frankly, they've done a good deal of cutting deals with Congress. I won't take pharmaceutical money, by the way. And there's two reasons for this. One, I think there's a whole lot of reform we need to do, and I don't want to ever come and say anything to me about giving my campaign money. Two, my son Josh, who I told you about before, who is adopted, his birth mother died when he was 7 years old of an opioid overdose. And so I don't believe just going after the treatment of addiction is going to solve this issue. I think we are going to have to think about what is different in America. It's direct-to-consumer marketing. It's our prescribing practices in this country. And of course, you saw the study out of the VA this morning, which I didn't read the study, so I hate to quote things. I don't read the actual study. But it looks like opioids, long-term, are no better at relieving pain than Tylenol. It's stunning, right? And yet we created a generation of addicts, here.
One thing
Yes,
I would
certainly.
say, Angie, too,
Yeah.
the healthcare issue,
Yeah.
when people start to tap into Medicare in this country, they need to be careful because the administrative costs for Medicare are less than private pay.
That's right.
So it is it's a good and efficient system that we have in place right now, and it needs to be expanded so that other people can be covered.
That's right. Jeff's allowing me to attack his industry now by saying that. So thank you, Jeff. No, it's an efficient system. I actually think we ought to reduce the eligibility age for Medicare. I think the biggest mistake out of the ACA is we did not price a Medicare buy-in, a public option with it. Let's let private insurance companies compete with Medicare. Now, the challenge you have is you still need the Part D plan. So your pharma companies are probably going to love that because that would create new business for them. So again, it's all tied together in a way that you have to understand, who's benefiting from what, or who's, as a good friend of mine used to say, who's getting gored. Yes, Lynn.
Yeah, so I think, well, first of all, I'm glad you're running again because I think you got a strong background and you'd be a great representative for us. But Scott spoke about the idea of taking back the country and, the difference of that 5% that you're looking to get. A lot of the people that voted for you last time, they're probably going to vote for you again.
Yep.
So the question then is how to get that other 5%. And I think there's enough people that voted for Trump that probably have, strong buyer's remorse or really regret that decision. And so, yeah, I mean, you turn on the TV, everybody knows. You see, not just one scandal, but you can take your pick of 5 or 6 scandals every night. And so I guess the question then is, how do you get your message out to the people? Because, you're not going to win the election based on the nuances of healthcare or whatever, policy stuff. You got to get to the emotional side of people where they're just, viscerally pissed at Trump and frankly want to throw out the Republican Congress who, basically is a rubber stamp for all the crap that's going on. And, how do you get your message out so that you can communicate at that level?
Well, I think what I would share with you first is it's really fascinating when you look at the polling currently in this district. Trump has a 44% approval rating. Paul Ryan has a 26. People are more upset with the Republican Party. They don't even take Trump serious enough, and they don't consider him a Republican, so the Republicans being inept doesn't rub off on Donald Trump. They don't even view him as part of a party, and it's just fascinating, Lynn. So I really do think one of the mistakes that Democrats made last cycle is we ran against Donald Trump or against Jason Lewis instead of telling the country what we're going to fight for. And I appreciate that, it can't be some drawn out answer on Medicare policy. But, imagine when Republicans were dumping $3 million on my head last cycle if we just sat me at a kitchen table with a stack of bills and my mother sitting across. And I said, I know what this is like. We didn't have health insurance growing up. If you can't afford it, it's not there for you. I spent 22 years working in healthcare. Want a radio guy or somebody who will try to get us healthcare? And I think this cycle we have something even better, which is they had 2 years. They didn't fix it. Repeal and replace it with what?
And he's got a voting
Show me the evidence. He voted for that bill twice. There is a wonderful photograph of Jason Lewis standing behind Donald Trump in the Rose Garden, smiling ear to ear after voting to take away health care from 24 million Americans.
Yeah.
I mean, that's gross.
And he holds himself out to be a conservative.
That's right.
But no conservative in their right mind would have voted for that tax bill.
$1.5 trillion.
$1.5 trillion of debt on top of the $20 billion we already have.
Yeah.
It's just, and that's, on the
He's a
next
hypocrite.
generation.
That's right. So I think we have to be careful here. We have to run for something, right? We're going to fix healthcare. We're going to make college more affordable. We're going to, grow jobs, whatever it is. And then I think we have to contrast how we would have behaved versus what Jason Lewis and congressional Republicans have done. I actually don't think, as I sit here today, something may happen that changes my mind, but I don't think we run against Trump. The people, the independents who are mad at Trump, I don't need to tell them that the world's in chaos every single day. They already know that. They get up every single morning and say, what 5 scandals happened today?
Yeah. And I guess I wasn't suggesting that you run against Trump, but I do think you need to tie Jason Lewis to the Trump and the Republican administration.
That's right, absolutely.
For what they're
Well,
doing.
what did Jason Lewis say? He said he would be an independent voice for Minnesota.
Yeah.
93% voting record with Donald Trump. And on every big vote, he voted with Republicans. He's been anything but independent as a member of Congress. And step back a minute. We talk about who you need to vote for you, right? So for the people who weren't following it that closely, I do quote the 1.79%. What does that really mean? So we actually had no change in turnout in this congressional district versus 2012. So on the surface of it, it looked like, turnout was about normal. But if you dig in the numbers, we had 21,000 of our 380,000 voters in 2016 were same-day voter registrations. They were not voters before 2016. Who were they there to support? Trump. And they voted R down the ballot. So 21,000 people turned up on election day in this district, voted Trump, voted down the ballot. The reason you don't see that in the numbers is because that many Democrats stayed home. At least 3% of Democrats in this district did not bother to vote in 2016. Now, what was happening, right? There had been a horrible fight between Bernie and Hillary. The party was divided. Many people felt like their candidate had not been treated fairly. And so, if you're a Republican, you're mad at your party because they nominated Donald Trump, and maybe you protest vote by voting for the independent for president. If you're a Democrat, this is what happened. They came and they protested the Democratic Party, or maybe they were protesting me, but I didn't have anything to do with it. And they voted independent. So it was generally a protest election. And anytime you get 21,000 Trump voters show up, that many Democrats decide they're staying home, it's going to be a bad night for the Democrat on the ballot. And unfortunately, that's what happened to us. We went into election day in the polling believing we were up 6 percentage points. We thought we were up 6 points. And if our turnout model had been correct, the 21,000 people who showed up out of nowhere and the Dems who stayed home, that's about what we would have. So when you think about it that way, I mean, how could I not run again? A tidal wave happened in 2016 that no one expected, and now we've been living with the consequences of that for 2 years. And what we saw in suburban New Jersey and in Virginia in that November of 2017 election, where they were flipping Trump districts that, went for him by 20 points in 2016. We only need a little bit. I believe we can win this district even if we do not have a Democratic wave in 2016. We just don't need a headwind from Republicans, and I don't think we're going to get that. So I don't even the good news is I don't need to talk a single Jason Lewis voter into voting for me in 2018. If they're frustrated with the party and Trump and they want to do that, then that'd be awesome. But we actually don't have to do that. And the truth is, we think, because we ended up overcoming the Trump wave, we overcame about 16 of the 21,000 votes in our own numbers. So we know there were lean Republicans who were coming our way in that 2016 election. We just couldn't prove it because we couldn't overcome that whole number. Yeah, I looked at the numbers real closely. It is important. The biggest thing to me was, not really, do you want to spend another year of your life running for Congress? The question for me was, did I want to come in rooms like this right now and tell you, we are going to win this district? Because I wasn't upset that I wasn't a member of Congress. I was upset that we don't have our values represented in this country anymore. This is personal to me this time. And it was always personal, but it's really personal now.
Me too.
Yeah, right? This is about more than an election in 2018. It really is.
Angie, can you share with us a little bit of your thoughts on what I'll call the intersection of mental illness and gun control?
Yeah, it's it's tricky. That's why if you go on my website, you won't see anything about mental illness on my website, because I have a tough time when people start to intersect it. But we know mental illness is a big issue in this country, but I don't like to equate, and really hate it when Republicans equate mental illness with gun control, because if we didn't have access to these lethal weapons, then we wouldn't be having this conversation to begin with. Let me back up for a minute on gun control. It was interesting because last fall, Gabby Giffords and her organization came into Minnesota too, and they did an event, and I was just one of 300 people there, and I met her for just a few minutes. And if you haven't really spent time with her since she was shot, and you've only seen the shots, she's given up a lot. Huge sacrifice for this country. And they called me after they heard my story with gun control, with gun safety. And they said, can we endorse you in your race? Usually the candidate is chasing the organization to be endorsed. But the reason they like me in this conversation is truly because if you come to my house, you will find a gun cabinet. 2 of my boys are hunters. One of them does trap and did it in high school. And I have a 20 gauge over under because it's really light. And I go trap shooting with my boys from time to time. And it's something that they will do with their mother. That's all I will say. But they like people to have this conversation with gun owners who actually know a little bit about guns in this country. If you just study the data, in states where we have universal background checks, there is a 40 to 50% reduction in domestic violence and suicide by gun. It's just stunning in those states if you just follow the data. I still can't believe the country prohibits study of gun violence by the Centers for Disease Control. I mean, we're talking about is we even, like when I say these things out loud, don't fly, no buy. We don't want you to fly on an airplane because we suspect you may be a terrorist. But yet, you could go buy an assault weapon. My son Jacob called me from Georgia, where he's in school, the day after the Parkland shooting. And he was, of course, kidding, but he said, hey, Mom, I'm on my way home from work. He works at Best Buy. And he said, I can't go buy a beer, ha-ha, but I could go buy an assault weapon. I mean, when you hear that coming out of a 19-year-old's mouth, he was making fun of the irony of the situation. And in Georgia, he can buy absolutely unlimited ammunition. I mean, there are places around this country where, Minnesota is strict on gun control compared to other places around the country. With respect to the intersection of mental illness, I think we've got to do a lot more work around this in this country because, look, we are not addressing mental illness in this country overall. And the intersection of gun violence, when we start to mesh these two together, we start to not have those conversations that I think we ought to be having around gun control because we want to blame people who are mentally ill or anyone who conducts themselves in this kind of manner. We want to blame their state of mind or mental illness. And to me, these are two incredibly separate topics that we have to make sure we do not conflate the two.
So take the next step then, you said we're not addressing the issue of mental illness in this country. What do you propose that we do?
Well, I think a good start would be to figure out how we actually fund public education in this country. If we could address mental illness earlier in childhood, we could actually help get perhaps cured. So my son, one of my sons is on the autism spectrum. And I can tell you, for the first 6 years of his life, we didn't know what was wrong with our son. Was it mental illness? Was it anxiety? Was it depression? Was it oppositional defiance disorder? What in the world was this?
Yes.
Until
It was all of it.
it was all of it. And in the end, it was all of it. And until we can actually address recognizing the problem. But when you have one school counselor with very little training in a public school, and they are given 300 to 600 kids to be responsible for, there's no way to address this. And even parents, even parents should learn to recognize, I think, the signs better of mental illness or depression, or, just how to get your kid help. And now we're running back into the healthcare system. Once you start to recognize these things, how do you get help for your kids? This state, the cities has 3 pediatric psychiatrists in the state. In the cities. 3 pediatric psychiatrists. Most of those wait lists are over 1 year long. And so for a kid who's on the autism spectrum and truly needs, ability to see these specialists, even with Mayo this close, guys, this is a parent's worst nightmare. So I think that would be a really good start, is making sure that we have the experts able to help identify with teachers and parents these issues early, so we can get them into treatment early and we can address these issues early.
And we're in better shape for providers in this part of the state than the rest of the state.
That's
It's been
right.
incredible.
And the rest of the country. I just can't tell you. As I think about Medicare itself, I had a family member who is on Medicare who needed psychiatric treatment. And in another state, it was estimated that she would need to wait 6 months for her appointment. This is someone who has this money, and the only other option was to go to clinic. This is what we're dealing with in healthcare costs. Yeah, and there's healthcare costs, right?
There's making an urgent, they provide it, whether it is
Right.
insurance or not. That's right. Those costs get shifted to all.
That's one of my dreams, like if you win the lottery, I have a son with Asperger's as well, and they don't do anything if your child is functional. There's nothing. There's everything that we did, we had to pay for out of pocket, and the social skills which take care of everything else are not there. And insurance doesn't cover it.
And it's $700 million shortfall right now because the money for special education and mental health support services are being taken out of the general education fund. So we've got that gap happening.
So the federal government is supposed to pay for 40% of special ed costs in this country. Last year they were at 14.8%. The federal government has not been living up to its commitment, and so the money's being pulled out of the general education budget. And you're seeing this pressure in the schools, right? We've got to meet the needs of all of our children, but the budget is really short. And we keep coming back to taxpayers because the federal government has decided to give the military $80 billion more than they requested in the budget. Now think about $80 billion more sending that to the states for public education in this country. The generals didn't want the money, but Trump sent it. Why? It's going to defense contractors. It's exactly why it got sent there. So it's a system that needs focus and change, and I can't wait to go to Congress and demand that we fully fund special education in this country.
Well, on college level too.
Yes.
I teach at a junior college. We have 1 counselor for the whole campus.
Yeah. That's right. Well, and that's the biggest thing. I told you I worked in 100 countries. We didn't have a lot of employees in most of those countries, but in about 10 we did. That's the difference between America today and the rest of the world. They have recognized that the best investments they can make are in their people. We had in Malaysia, it's fascinating. I went to Malaysia once, and every single Malaysian now has a 4-year degree coming out of it, fully funded by the Malaysian government. And in fact, you pick the track for English when you're in elementary school for the regional English you want to speak. You can speak like Hunter, or you can speak like me, depending on how you want to speak.
Articulate, inarticulate.
Now, people ask me where did this accent come from, and I said, well, I live south of the cities. This is what we sound like down there. But you question again? Just remember, then I always say, John Klein's from Texas. Just remember that. He spent over 20 years as our congressman. So, and by the way, Jason Lewis is from Colorado, and he lives in Woodbury. He doesn't live in this congressional district. How many of you did not know that? See? There's still people in the district who do not know that Jason Lewis does not live in this district.
He can't even vote for himself.
No, it's so awesome. His congressman is Betty McCollum. It's so awesome. It's like, did you push that last time? We polled it heavily, and it didn't seem to do well. I have a gut, though. I just have a gut this time. Do you remember when John Ossoff was running in that special election in Georgia, and Donald Trump kept tweeting, he doesn't even live here, he doesn't even live here. I think it'd be really funny for an outside group to have Trump's tweets. He doesn't even live here, he doesn't even live here. And then Jason Lewis's mugshot instead of John Ossoff.
Yeah. Well, I think that's really important for people to know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it just takes 2 lines of dialogue to say it.
Right.
Quick throwaway in the stump speech, and you got.
And he ran in Colorado. I don't know if you know, he's run for this was his second run for Congress. He ran for Congress in Colorado before he came to Minnesota. So he's run twice too. So I say, okay, I'm gonna win. What do you think?
What were the results? I mean, obviously he lost.
Oh, he lost by like 15 or 16 points. Yeah, he got beat very badly.
Angie, you got one more time for a question?
Yeah, one more question.
One that's very dear to my own heart because it's so personal, it's immigration. And there's an all-out war against immigrants in this country, and I share my own immigrant story because of what we bring when we come to America and what we add as value as American citizens. What would we do to help safeguard immigrants who are so terrified today? I know I felt very terrified after Trump won. And every day or every time I see him tweet and come out with some new policy that's about restricting immigrants and keeping immigrant families from each other. I have my family who still live in South America, and we've got this all-out war and what we call chain migration, which I know what it is like to miss holidays with my family or miss funerals or miss birthdays. What are you going to do to make sure that we don't have to live at that kind of fear going forward?
Well, we're going to elect a bunch of Democrats who are committed to the DREAM Act, first and foremost. I mean, and I'm not kidding here. If this isn't an issue that a Democrat will say to you, I will vote for this, don't do it. Don't do it. I'm telling you, it's that important. These kids are Americans. They are my son's friends. They are the workforce we're going to need 10 years from now when all you baby boomers start to retire. I'm serious. These are American educated young people who absolutely deserve a very clear path to how they can earn their citizenship. They are Americans in everything but citizenship today. So we have to start with the dreamers. I truly believe that. We have to change the way immigration is conducted in this country. This is going to be harder, but the current lottery system is racist. Let's just call it for what it is. It's a racist system. It favors European nations. It favors people who look European. That is how that system was designed, and that is how that system currently works. When people talk about chain migration or family members, I often talk to people who say, well, why don't they just apply to be legal? There is no system to apply to be legal currently in this nation. And until we build this system with a committed group of people, and by the way, this is a bipartisan issue. I know it doesn't feel that way right now because the two parties are, the Republicans are using this. And yes, maybe we have to give some border security funding as part of this commitment and common ground. If it's a wall, it's going to be a little picket fence. But, my point is, we've got to work with Republicans to figure out, border security, fine, we'll give you some funding, but we have got to have a path to citizenship for these dreamers. We cannot, remember, think about this. There's an injunction, the deadline passed. Trump's artificial deadline has now passed. DACA is no more, all right? There is an injunction right now which prohibits the administration from just coming in and taking out all of these kids. And they're not even kids. I mean, they're people with, older people now with children, but they were brought here as children or as young people. And we've got to come up with a system where there is a path forward. And, I am fully committed to making sure that I find that path forward because we cannot allow this to go on. And I step back, again, those of you who've worked in business, the problem we are going to have is we don't have enough workers for the jobs that we have. And so, again, these are a labor force that are tailor-made for America. And so we've just got to step forward and be brave here. And, I'm kind of sick of Democrats walking away from this issue every time we walk toward it. Very sick of it. Don't get me started on that. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for coming. I'm going to stick around a little while longer if you have any question you didn't want to ask in the group. But I just want to say thank you to every single one of you. How many of you are delegates at an upcoming convention? So what I need from you is to sub-caucus for Angie Craig, because I need to win the DFL endorsement to be able to have that rematch with Jason Lewis. For those of you who aren't delegates, what I need for you to consider is how you can personally get involved in our campaign. And I know this is like, I don't want to work on a campaign. It's really easy. This is how I got started myself working in Democratic politics. There are many ways you can do it. The easiest way is pull out your checkbook or your credit card, and you can help fund one of these amazing staffers so that I can pay them and make payroll at the end of each month. The campaign contribution will help us do that. You can volunteer for us over the next couple of weekends at one of the conventions that are going on. I mean, literally, you'd be wearing an Angie Craig t-shirt, walking around the clipboard asking people to sign up and volunteer. You can volunteer to come into our campaign office, which is in Burnsville, right on the corner of Nicollet and McAndrews, not far from the city center. Is that what we call it in Burnsville?
Heart of the city.
Heart of the city. And you can volunteer for the campaign. You can do calls to folks. You can do administrative tasks. We have one wonderful couple who comes in and cleans our bathrooms for us. Literally, there's something to be done. Over the summer, you can door knock and help us that way. And if none of those sound good to you, if you really are an introvert, we will find something for you to do where you do not have to talk to anybody. I don't know what that is right now, but we will find something for you to do. And then the last thing I want to mention, and then I'm going to ask my staff that I mention it all. I've met some really amazing high school kids in this room today. And I know gun violence is a big topic on our minds right now. A living wage, minimum wage is a big topic. I think you've been studying in your classroom. If you care about these issues, I want to be the kind of campaign that really extends and offers as many fellowships, internships to high school students, especially this cycle. Because I believe the difference in this race in 2018 is going to come down to young people being involved. We have never seen a midterm in at least the last 2 decades where I am more optimistic that young people are going to show up to vote. But I think they're going to show up a long time before that. So if anybody here is interested in becoming an intern for our campaign, Colin, raise your hand please, in the back. We can sign you up or talk to you more about that. And I don't care, Mara's my campaign manager, she's standing in the back. You know all those Senate races we won in New Jersey last year? Mara won 6 of them. So, thank you, Mara. Just got one more. But if anybody wants to be involved in this campaign, what I'm going to leave you with is this is your campaign. This is your country. This is our country. I won't win without you. And you won't win without me. So let's go do this together because we are going to change the course of this country together. Thank you.
to get a picture of you and everybody surrounding you.
Okay, I want to give this gentleman about
Sure.
3 or 4 minutes
Okay.
just to introduce himself.
Would that be all right with all of you?
Sure. Yeah,
Sure. Well, I
go.
appreciate it.
Yep.
So my name is Hunter Cantrell, and I've lived in Savage for the last 15 years of my life. I went to Hidden Valley, I went to Eagle Ridge, and I graduated from Burnsville High School. Currently, I work in a program to help kids who, would typically fall into the opportunity gap because they just need a little bit more one-on-one attention in order to develop the skills that they need to be the academic and workforce leaders of the future in our state. And I work at Burnsville High School and Eagle Ridge Middle School. I've been a home health aide for the last 6 years, and I've worked with adults and children who have developmental disabilities. So making sure that we do something to address the shortage in home care workers and people who can help provide these supportive services for people who might just need a little extra help is something that's really near and dear to me because, I've seen what happens when people don't get the care that they need. Minnesota in particular has a really outrageous problem with unaddressed cases of abuse and neglect in our senior care facilities. My great-grandmother passed away in March of last year because in Arizona, you don't have to report a fall. In Minnesota, you have to report a fall in care facilities. She was on hospice already, and she fell twice and broke her tailbone. So I've seen firsthand what happens when we don't have the care and measures in place to protect people. Now, I first got involved in politics in 2012 with the Vote No on the Marriage Amendment. And a lot of folks did. To me, that was just an incredible opportunity to advocate side by side with Minnesotans of all political persuasions to advocate for our mutual human rights. Mm-hmm. Now, around that same time was when I first started dating my first boyfriend. Now, he came to the census, so it didn't work out. But for me, this was an opportunity to join with our friends and our neighbors, people in this community, to fight for something that really mattered. It was more than just about one candidate. It was about an ideal that we all deserve equity in this country, that we all are entitled to equity in this state. And now I've unfortunately seen, especially after this past election, that so much of the progress that we have made, equity for LGBT Minnesotans, equity for people who are immigrants, both documented and undocumented in our country, people who are part of the working class. That all is being threatened, and it can be taken away if we don't do anything. But in this room and in this community, I see people who are ready to answer the call and accept the challenge. And it's going to be challenging. But so is everything worth doing. Now, one of the things I've always appreciated about Angie Craig, and boy do I appreciate her, is that her and I are both fighters. Last year I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is a rare but very treatable form of cancer. I went through 7 months of chemotherapy, and I'm proud to say that as of December 26, 2017, I am now cancer-free. But you know what? I want to make sure that anybody in our state who would ever happen to have the misfortune of being diagnosed with cancer is able to say those same exact words. Because there was a young man who graduated a year after I did from Burnsville High School who had to crowdfund his survival on GoFundMe, which 60% of the $2 billion that has been raised on GoFundMe over the past 2 years has been for healthcare costs. He had to crowdfund his survival to survive his acute lymphoblastic leukemia diagnosis. And I don't think that that's acceptable. Not in the richest country in the history of the world. We can do better, and we need to do better for our neighbors. Now, I mentioned I worked in a high school, and so I've been thinking a lot about Parkland lately, and about Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. And I think about every day, if that's going to be the last day that I'm going to see these students who I work with, who are going to be the folks who can make such a beautiful impact on the world. And you know what? I don't think they should have to live in fear. But unfortunately, we have a state legislature that voted down 2 common sense gun safety reforms just this past week. HF 1605 would have been a measure that would have allowed loved ones, family members, and law enforcement to petition a court to separate somebody who is either showing signs of being dangerous to themselves or others from their firearms. HF 1669 would have expanded criminal background checks to almost all gun transfers. They were both stalled in committee. Now, I think this community deserves better, and I'm committed to working alongside each and every one of you, not only today or not only until this election, but for every day, because even if I don't have the honor of serving you in the State House, I'm not going anywhere. I'll be right there with you, and I look forward to, making sure that we do the work that needs to be done for everyone in our community. Thank you all.
If you don't mind, I'm gonna stand right here.
Yeah.
Everybody stand, go. Yeah, come on, Deb.
Got it.
Okay, great.
There you go. Get up here, guys. Get up here. That is great.
You said there were only 10 people coming.
I need to do coffee.
It's not about height.
No, that's good. Renita, come on.
You gotta get in there. You gotta get up there. I'll squeak in.
Who's next? Awesome. Very good. Thanks, everybody. Lots of treats for people.
Yeah, okay. Help yourself, please. We've got lots and lots of food, stuff to drink.
Yeah, exactly.
Your picture.
Yeah. Okay.
Everything me. You guys would have right here a while ago. It's nice that you guys are
I love tropical. Anywhere you're not. So Russia, which I'm really gonna want to. Yeah. Energy.
always passionate. It's always holding that position. You want that passion.
See you guys. Study hard.
Steve, how you doing? Great, nice to see you. Nice to see you. I don't remember you stopped by my house this last week. Great job. This is my wife, Sherry.
Well, I can tell you this, I never thought I would see the ability to get married in my lifetime. 25 years ago.
The convention on April 14th is where that one gets decided. Now before that, district 14th is your
Did you make the cider ale?
Yeah. Yeah, well, we own Montgomery Orchard and the winery under our orchard. And so, yeah, this is...
Where do we get a cup? I'd love to try it.
Yeah, right around the corner, there's a bunch of plastic cups.
I came with a cup, my first.
Oh, she's working for the Okay, so it forms a really big head. It's going to take at least 2 pours for us to get what you need.
Okay.
Is that this stuff?
Yeah, that's the graph. It's
half and half?
It's 25% English ale, 75% hard cider.
I tried some of this while everyone was talking, this full Monty.
Full Monty, over ice, I hope.
Well, I
didn't want to make a lot of noise, so I put a couple of ice cubes, and I realized this is not going to do the trick.
Right,
So
right. It's real Applejack. It's real thing. Yeah.
Thank you. That song went to Morris. Remember, she's going to Morris.
Yes, and he's here. Yes, he's a big Morris advocate, I'll tell you, but he is with the big black beard.
Oh, okay.
There he is, right there.
That's your son?
That's my son.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for hosting it.
Oh, absolutely.
That's a good turnout.
Really good. Really good. I was a little worried here a few days ago because we hadn't, didn't have as many people sign up as we had hoped. But, latecomers. Latecomers, so that's good.
So it's 25% ale and 75% cider.
Hard cider. Yep. Yeah. As you can tell, it looks like a beer. It smells like a beer, but the taste totally different. More of the cider on the taste. But
He's over there.
If I don't see you again, nice to meet you.
Well, you own an apple orchard. And so it's all apple based. This is 19%.
Wow.
So it's really strong. It's very smooth. It's like, if you like Jack Daniel's honey or something like that, it's smooth like that. But you don't need very much. This one is an apple wine, but it's complex and just a
You need to drink this with ice.
No, this one.
This one?
So do you also just make like plain cider, like non-alcoholic cider?
Yes, we've got 2,000 trees, we have a corn maze.
And are you a member of the there's like a cider association or something?
Yeah, but I don't know that we're part of the hard cider.
You should be. They have a cider festival.
It's great you're here.
Yeah.
So what year are you?
Micro sugar.
And you have something like that?
All good schools. Yeah. Good luck.
they're all pretty similar.
Yeah, probably.
They're all going down to community.
45 minutes south of here. So where do you live?
I'm actually home with my mom.
Trying to get you around to the
So much right here right now, but I lived in the city for a while. And, yeah.
Okay, well,
I know you can live in Montgomery.
we're 4 miles south of Montgomery on 99. You can either go to Faribault or St. Peter. Looks like a little log cabin. So we've got the cider tasting room. We've got the little store. You can go pick your own. It's corn maze.
Well, I love cider. Right out of college, I lived in France for 2 years.
Oh yeah?
And it was like in the north of France, but like in Normandy, they have this form of cider drinkers.
You do the practice one?
It's still, I'd love to go through there and drink ingredients and stuff.
You do
Yeah,
that?
I know. I didn't have a lot of
Don't follow up your step.
I didn't have a lot of time there because I was just a teaching assistant. So I kind of had to stay where I was. I was looking at what's in the metrics for this school, but I don't like to
Try the stuff.
like to. But at least the stuff that was there, I know I hope to go back sometime. But yeah, I really gained an appreciation for hard cider. Yeah, thanks for sharing. It's awesome.
Thank you for sharing your home. Absolutely, we're glad to be here.
Those rocks right now are shifted.
That's one of the biggest things is transparency in cost.
To find what is the cost.
What is the cost?
Yeah.
Are you in healthcare as well?
No, but I broke my back when I was 25, and I've seen my medical bills only go through the roof.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Yeah, and it's something that really matters to me. And actually, I'm really interested in hearing more about your stance on like the gun stuff, especially as a gun owner.
Right.
Like my family, I have a lot of hunters in my family too. But like, my brother actually killed himself with a gun.
Right. Right.
Yeah, and he used a shotgun.
Right.
But I'm really interested. Like, what's your stance on like assault on the AR-15?
Yeah. We should ban
semi-automatic.
We should ban all military-style weapons in this country. We should limit the amount of ammunition. I mean, if I have to report to Walgreens when I buy, Sudafed,
you have to show your ID to
and
get NyQuil.
Yeah, I gotta show my ID to get NyQuil, but I can buy unlimited ammunition. I mean, we should have a way to keep track of who's buying what, so that we can monitor it.
One thing that where it's always hard to say is like in the case of my brother.
In the case of your brother,
he had his own gun, but he actually has a gun. So it's also like it's a really complicated thing. I mean, you can and really, I mean, it makes me sad to talk about. I mean, it's been a while now since my brother died, but it's something that makes me very emotional. Sure. But it's kind of one of those things with somebody who's suicidal, no matter what, they're gonna. If they really want to die, they're gonna find a way. So it's kind of like, and I like it that you don't automatically say, oh, people with mental illness are the ones that kill people, shoot schools, and vice versa. But there are.
Look, the ideas we have today are not going to solve every incident of gun violence. But if we can reduce the incidents of gun violence, if your brother had the mental health needs met, maybe he would not have got to that point. But you're right. I mean, that wouldn't solve your brother having access to a shotgun. And I'm really, really sorry for your loss. I can't even imagine what that's like in your family. I can't.
I mean, I can miss him.
Yeah, it affects your entire family for the rest of your life.
It's a long time. I was back in 03, and we've made tremendous strides in research on mental health. But like I quite honestly, like you always hear about like suicide prevention, but suicide prevention isn't enough. We really have to learn more about mental illness, and like genetic predisposition for it, and we're talking about getting counselors in schools. There's a lot of people, especially men and young men, that if the resources are there, they're not just like going to go to it.
I know. And it is, because it's societal. We teach men to be strong.
Yeah.
They can't admit when they are weak or need help.
And like my brother was 20, so my parents knew he was having a really hard time. My parents had no power. They could do nothing.
Right. That's right. But if your brother had shown signs that he was going to inflict self-harm, the law that Hunter talked about would have allowed police or your parents to get an order to have a gun to remove.
But even then still, he used my dad's gun, and he could have hung himself. So the gift, you know what I'm saying? Like,
right. No, you're absolutely. It won't solve everything. It won't solve it. But what the stats show in states where universal background checks are absolutely required on all online private sales, there's a 50% reduction, because for someone who didn't have access already to a firearm, they actually get it, buy it. Just that window of space between their episodes can buy enough time
I'm more willing to entertain that one,
actually
but still no.
Yeah. And, I'm sorry that the circumstances and the mental health treatment didn't line up with your brother.
I mean, it happens far more than you would ever imagine. It's amazing.
It does.
My brother died. It opens your
Lynn, it's so good to see you.
Same here. Good luck.
Thank you so much.
You meet a lot of people that
I know. I can't believe, I'm just stunned now at the number of people I meet who were touched by gun violence. Really have been.
And I think for my brother's case, it really was more so mental illness. I mean, my family has a history of mental illness. But but you know, and my brother loved hunting too, so I would hate to have said because he has mental illness, he shouldn't get such a good, you know, I don't know.
It's a tough one. It really is.
But anyway,
Well, thank you for sharing your story. Thank you. Thanks so much for sharing your story.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I don't want to take too much of your attention, but I'm also like, because I broke my back and I bought some medical bills, that is something that matters to me. And like, you know, I think it kind of said it perfectly when Donald Trump got in office and said healthcare is a lot more complex than it
Yes,
looks.
right, exactly.
Like, what kind of specifics would you say that we could do to improve? I mean, you know, if I could say education, that's the thing. So I actually lived in France for 2 years, and France was touted as the best country in the world for healthcare. Right. And the reason is because of access. Yep. If you actually go there and experience the healthcare system, it's horseshit. Yeah. I hate to be so blunt, but part of the reason I have permanent nerve damage is because of how the doctor was it was, I mean, I could see it in the blood, quite honestly. It was really bad healthcare. And so, you know, I think it's good that more people have access, but the cost has gone up. And then it's also like, I would rather have limited access to really good healthcare than easy access to bullshit healthcare that could actually be detrimental in the long run. So, I mean,
that's the challenge. Is we've got to figure out how to do both. And if we do too much of one before we do the other, it's this. I mean, it's this imperfect imbalance where we're going to have to be bold. I think. We're going to have to be bold. I mean,
we as citizens need to own some of it.
Right. That's right.
How do we be bold?
Well, responsibility for our own health, right? I mean, in this country,
most of our chronic conditions are caused by
reversible. They're reversible. With
diabetes and
with better, healthier eating habits. I mean, with
so that goes into education then.
It's education. It's access.
Well, see, and I'm really
healthy food.
I mean, apart from I was on bed rest for 2 months 2 years ago because I graduated my disc, and for like 5 days they gave me I got some steroids just to because it was like delusional. I mean, the pain was so bad. But really bad. Other than that, I've never taken any drugs for my pain, and it's all mindfulness and like.
Good for you.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's really awesome.
Anyway, so I understand that. So and like a lot of it is like healthy eating. Like, I think you're right.
On the providers, they've been pushed to keep it. They get patients they get evaluated by other patients because they know that they control their pain. And if their nurses are not one person, they get punished by how they get reimbursed. And so I think we a lot of friends for national push the drugs so that they can get higher scores so they can get reimbursed.
I'll tell you, 2010 when I first got hit by a car. I was walking across the street and I got hit by a car in France when I was living there. And since then, my pain score, which is totally arbitrary by the way, I mean, how do you really measure pain? It's never been lower than a 4. Like my new 4 is my new 0. So if a physician is graded on, their performance is graded based on their patients, like me, who always have a 4, and it's like, sorry, there's no way I'm going to go down
So I was working at a major healthcare system when those CMS. No, that's okay. But when that whole thing started to blow up, the opioid crisis. But we were running behind physicians, surveying patients, asking them what will it take. I mean, basically, what's it going to take to make a difference in the scoring? And we didn't ask it that way, but it was trying to get a handle on it because they're trying to get paid for the services that they're providing too. And a part of it is, are you satisfied with how your pain was controlled? And nobody, you can't expect to have a total hip replaced or a total knee replaced and not have some pain. But that's what people want. That's what they expect. And so we ended up pushing
people's expectations. And you're right, right? And I think in a lot of ways we just become soft. I mean, humans are just
and we have the ability to do
all about instant gratification.
Right. We have the ability ability to do all this amazing stuff.
Yeah.
But it doesn't come without pain.
You're right.
I mean, gosh, years ago they didn't do it.
Yeah.
Or people wouldn't have lived long enough to have an opportunity to
So you're saying, as a society, we just all need a higher pain threshold. And then, maybe there's some truth to the fact that a little struggle is good for everybody. I mean, my life has been
we can't reward the physicians to get the pain down, and the only way they can do that is they don't get to go home and make sure they go to their PT appointments, or that they exercise, or that they push themselves and know that it's going to take a couple of months for them to heal and to get strength back.
4 years or never.
Yeah, and if they don't get off their seats, they're not going to ever.
I know, both my parents are overweight and all that kind of stuff, and they're, for the most part, they're pretty healthy, but I really wish that their doctors would just say, hey, you need to move more, you need to have a better diet, and I wish more doctors were to say that.
I mean,
But it's across the whole country, and I don't know anybody saying that they should do it, that people will do it. I also used to work in, because I've worked in healthcare for my whole career, both on the provider side and on the health insurance side, in the health services division. And we've had, employees, it's no different than employees. They want to be able to see what the protein analysis is, how many calories, what's the carbs, and what's the fat content, and so on and so on. And you can put all that stuff up there. You can have promotions for healthy food. You can make the salad bar really attractive and inexpensive and subsidized by the employer. And you know what people are doing? Right. Good, right? I mean, so we say that it's like if you have that knowledge and we offer it, that people are going to be healthy, but it's not true. As long as people have the choice, and people choose bad eating habits and many I've just done a lot of reading and documentaries on immunosuppression and Hashimoto's disease and Crohn's and chronic ulcerative colitis, and there's so much that is connected to the big things are genetics for one. So we have a genetic predisposition, but that doesn't mean that we're going to get it, because if you have other environmental factors, then that may be enough to trigger it. And there's so many times.
But you can still, there is the possibility for never acquiring something you might have a genetic predisposition for if you take this way. Yeah. And somebody knowing, okay, well, my family has history of cancer, can make choices to not get cancer.
Right. And it means I have to eat a healthy diet. I have to eat vegetables. I need to and not everybody wants to do that, or not everybody can afford to.
I'll tell you, that's a kind of, for me, that's a kind of easy cop-out, though. And I'm not saying you are.
I would agree.
But I've been poor my whole life. I mean, like, my mom lost her house at the bank. My mom was a single mom with 4 kids. And when I saw my dad, it was like, whatever, he didn't really help out that much. And I'll tell you, frozen food aisle, frozen vegetables are, if you get them on special, you can get them for less than $1 a bag. A pound of frozen vegetables. And I've read that they're actually arguably more nutritious than fresh produce, because the produce, like, whatever the companies are, like Green Giant, say, they buy the broccoli or the peas or whatever right at its peak, and they flash freeze it. Whereas the fresh produce, they have to pick it a week earlier, and then it has to get transported, and then sits in the grocery store.
Sitting there with the pesticides on it.
Yeah, exactly. And by then, it's ripe. It's ripe, but it's not. It never fully developed all the nutrients, because it was picked early. So frozen vegetables, I mean, never even mind the canned foods, which are also inexpensive. Lots of weird stuff. But people could do more, and I know that takes time. But you know what? A frozen bag of peas or broccoli or corn or whatever. Everybody likes at least corn. Throw it in the microwave. And I eat that. I'm not getting breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Eggs are inexpensive. I mean,
oatmeal is cheap.
Oatmeal. I mean, some people say, oh, it's too expensive to be healthy. Look at people back in the Great Depression. Depression, those people were real survivors. They were fighters, and they had nothing, and they have very healthy diets.
So I'm a, you know what I mean? Family of 5 kids. My youngest brother was considered a vegetable. He was severely disabled. My dad had an 8th grade education. I mean, we survived by a garden and freezing and canning, and we lived on the edge of town, and we were able to go after the farmer had plowed the field for potatoes. Would send us out. Us kids would go in the field and we'd pick potatoes and put them in the cellar for the rest of the winter. And so, you know, not that people have farms nearby where you could go out and pick up what's left in the field, but
even more,
but you can.
Nowadays, even in the city, I think it's like, you know, $40, $50. I don't actually know. My friends who do it. Yeah, and it's like on the highway. But it's like, hey, there's fertile soil right there. Why not? So people could also just be willing to put in some time, you know, and it's educational, it's fun. I mean, you know, I grew up on a farm too, so I know, yeah. Well, I'm originally from, on the way out to Buffalo, Minnesota. It's actually west. It's farther west.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I went to a hockey tournament there.
Yeah. So that's just, you know,
hockey game anyway.
Yeah. Nice. Well, so nice to meet you. Alana, okay.
Yeah. And I'm from northwestern Minnesota, up in East Grand Forks.
Okay, yeah. Cool.
But I've been in the cities now for 39 years.
Well, so nice to meet you. I'm Anya.
Hi.
Yeah.
Anya?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's Norwegian, so.
Oh, I'm Norwegian too.
Nice. Good.
Have you been there?
Never been there. I really want to go someday.
Yeah, my husband and I went in 2014. Yeah. And we met up with a girl and was there, and oh my gosh, it's so beautiful. Wonderful. And so we kept in contact with Oscar and Darty, are the two that we spent most of our time with. You know, from their perspective, from healthcare and from safety and guns, and they're like, healthcare, they just can't imagine. I mean, so I'm 61, my husband is 62, and they're like, you can't retire yet? Or you know, why? Oh my gosh. It's like, well, you know, we really need to work for healthcare. They're like, well, that is so not even in their radar, and not at all. But they don't have the same kind of healthcare that we do, and they don't need a pill for everything.
Yeah. Well, the other thing too, and this is kind of hitting on the self-reliance bit, is that Norwegians in general, just as a homogenous population too, for the most part, they all work really hard. They're hardworking people. They just have a good work ethic, and then they always stay active. I mean, you know, I have a lot of friends, you know, that study here, or you know, Americans who study there, or whatever. They're out skiing or hiking or whatever. So they take really good care of themselves, make really good healthy diets. But then, like, they're all like, you know, it's just a small population.
Never increase their life.
Yeah, exactly. And they don't do stuff like that.
No, because Oscar said we were with them for 2 full days, and they served us wine, but Oscar wouldn't have any. And they said, well, are you going to have any? And he goes, oh no, I will drive you back to your hotel. It's like that was 5 hours. I mean, that was 5 hours where we had the last night.
And it's probably because they probably like 0% or whatever.
It's 0 to he said I could lose my license, and that is my occupation. I can't afford to do that.
And it's just not worth it.
No. But you know, when I was over there, I had congestion. And it was in the summertime, and I went to a drugstore, and I wanted to get like a Sudafed or something to help break up the sinuses. I went into a pharmacist, and she said, like, no, we could pay the language barrier there. So, but they didn't have. She said, we don't have that. We don't have that. And so I went to the next pharmacy further down the road and tried again. And now there was a young gal that spoke very, very good English. And she said, you know, we don't practice the same way you do in America. If you have sinuses, blockage, we have nasal drops that will help loosen that up. But we don't take a pill for it to break up your sinus cavity.
Because that goes in your whole body versus like this option. Yeah. That's what I liked about France too. I mean, you know, they have some more homeopathic stuff. But I mean, the funny thing is that I actually grew up more that way.
I did too.
Yeah, because like with my nutrition reaction, even with my heavy pain, I never even take like Tylenol. I mean, rarely. I maybe take it like 2 times a month when I have, you know, and I even when I have a headache, but like maybe like when, you know, my back is hurting particularly more than usual, and maybe I'll take some ibuprofen or Tylenol or something. But I never even think about it, you know. Push through, you know. Yeah. I think I was just raised that way too.
No, we were too. I mean, we didn't even, because the only medicine we really in the house was berries.
Oh yeah.
There was occasionally berries.
Yeah. I don't overstay my welcome. So yeah, nice to chat with you.
Sorry to hear about your brother.
Yeah, I know. It's, you know, I mean, it is what it is. I guess there's not much you can do about it once it's done. But you know, I hope
I just want to introduce myself. I'm Aaron. I'm Barb's son.
be inspired by it.
And I work at Normandale Community College. And everything you said really resonated with me. This is wrong.
There you go.
Actually, oh my God, I'm sorry. That's very Oh yeah, there's some water right there. Do you want a water?
Oh, yeah.
So we're supposed to have this on ice? We put this on ice?
You're putting the wine or the
I think
cider?
in this one, yeah. Didn't you say it's supposed
So
to be?
this is Monty. That's the wine.
Yeah, but I think he was saying you're supposed to serve it on ice.
Oh, they are. That's a good one. They are. They only have one in Minnesota. Yeah.
So cool.
Oh, I was thirsty.
Where you are, too. Yeah.
Involved in ours. Okay. Right, because you're in a different. Yeah. We're getting ready for ours. Okay. Are you going to? Are you a doctor? No. I'm not. I'm just getting in front of. Sure.
Those are so pretty. I almost don't want to eat them. I don't know. I just want to try them all. Want to try it? Are they homemade?
They're from Hy-Vee.
Oh, wow.
They're so good. Yeah, they're all different kinds. That's red velvet. That's almond.
Hold on, this is
raspberry. This is almond.
No, it's like way better. You have to try
Oh, I had that. I had that one at work. But
Oh my God.
It's caramel. Caramel? Salted, like a salted
Oh, well, peanut butter underneath.
Look at this one. Has a
Peanut butter cup.
oh my God. I just can't.
Are you?
I had donuts. Are you
No, I'm not. I have some. I have sometimes I went to Bloomfield, and sometimes I went to Bloomington, which school. Yeah, what year did you graduate?
77.
Okay. Well, what are you doing now? Water action. Yeah, good stuff. That's right. I learned about Angie Craig, and I was really excited. So I was voting in my home district, so I decided to not change my permanent address and just stay. Yeah, there you go. I have a happy memory of clean water action way back when I was like probably a freshman in college. And somebody came, they were doing some door knocking and signing people up. And my sister and I actually read at the U of M, so we were on the Mississippi River. And I just remember we signed up, and then every year, you renew your dues or whatever. But my brother actually passed away in 2003, and he was a big fan of, all of the environmental stuff and water. So I think we kind of carried on.
Oh, you remember?
I maybe haven't caught, been keeping up the last couple of years because I'm really strapped because I'm paying off a bunch of medical bills for my son. But yeah, I always try to keep an eye on that. So yeah.
Cool, yeah.
Have you ever heard of Susan's Climate Lobby?
That's what Angie was saying, and I mean, I have not.
You haven't?
No.
You should look it up. Susan's Climate Lobby. It's originally based in DC, but now they have like chapters kind of all over the U.S. and they advocate for awareness of climate change.
Sure.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. I'm gonna grab my bag, Mom.
Molly, did you want to get Miranda's contact info? Molly has a contact info. Oh, yeah. I would like to call you. Yeah, for sure. That's what I always do. Okay, I'm sorry.
So I will answer.
I'm supposed to carry my phone around for my calls like in a month.
Yeah, mine too.
All right, you're in.
That was really good.
Yeah, I know, that's awesome. Yes. So are you already with the campaign, or how?
No, I haven't. I'm trying to learn more about everything.
Great.
I just want to make sure I stay informed. So.
I'm just Scott and Barb's daughter, so here to observe.
Thank you for having us over now.
I was gonna help. But gosh, they have everything all set up. No help needed. So do you live in the district then?
Yeah, in the congressional district.
Yeah. We used to live in Rosemount, so I still get Jason Lewis's emails, even though we're like up in Woodbury now in Betty McCollum's district.
Oh yeah.
And like
I can't believe it that he lives in that district too.
Right. Every time I get one of the emails, I'm like, oh, I want to unsubscribe, but also I want to know what's happening. You know?
Well, and one thing too is like I feel like when people say like one way or another is this side or that side, it's like ultimately they're the people that represent you, and not that he does, but
still, yeah.
But like it's like it actually is every citizen's responsibility to pay attention, whether you like it or not. Because if you like it, then that's good, and if you don't, that's when you're supposed to make a change,
right?
You know, so I think, quite honestly, I mean, I think so much of the problem is that everybody's so polarized. And people are afraid to hear the other side, and like, I think it's about sides, it's not about sides. It's like, a lot of the things that we do talk about, like if you, I mean, I have friends on both sides and all sides, and pathetic, people, whatever. And so many of our basic complaints and concerns and worries and fears are exactly the same, and it's just like, hey, can we just let's just come up with an idea as friends and like, you know what I mean? Right. It doesn't have to be so Quite honestly, I think the government wants us to pit ourselves against each other. The machine. You know what I mean?
Easier to control when we're just like shaking our fists at each other.
Totally. Someone mad at each other instead of, you know, the people who are ultimately slapping the rules and stuff, you know?
I know a state rep, actually on my side of town in Woodbury named Joanne Ward. And she has this whole project called the Civil Discourse Project. And I just really like the whole concept of it, you know, where she's like, well, let's just figure out how do we talk without yelling. You know, how do we, like, not just...
So it's called Civil Discourse Project?
Civil Discourse.
Such a pleasure to meet you. Oh my God, this has been awesome. Thanks for sharing your story.
Yeah, so I kind of go on and on. But yeah, thanks for listening. Yeah, it's really awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, check it out though. Oh,
yeah. Anyway, so citizens discourse?
Or civil discourse.
Oh, civil discourse. Okay, cool. I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, and it's like the state rep, Joanne Ward, has been the one who's really pushed it forward. But it's a project it's starting in Minnesota, but I think that it's spreading around. Yeah.
Minnesota has some good ones like that. That's really great. Because we're trying to build over here. That's awesome. And what was your name again?
Oh, sorry, Miranda.
Okay.
It's nice to meet you, Anya.
Yeah, thanks again. This was a really nice experience, and I think it's really extra cool to have it be quaint and like it just seems we're so personable.
Oh,
you know?
yeah, no kidding.
Instead of being like a big stage or whatever.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to be the last one.
Yeah. So
yeah, so we can grab the water.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Oh yeah. I barely ever wear it.
Bye. Nice car.
Just push. It's broken. I put it in. Not itself somehow.
Thank you so much. This was awesome. This is really
Hey Lance, so you got all that stuff behind you.
Oh, that's okay.
You sure?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
fine.
Gotta have things up in here too. Yes.
Let me,
happy to be here. We'll make it.
You guys hold up one sec. Let me get ahead of you one more time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so Angie.
All right. Oh. Never quit. Always photo op stuff.
That's what happens when your friend from college decides to follow you around for 4 days.
That's so cute.
And they're cool.
Yeah.
He's a documentary filmmaker now, and so they're doing a little video for the convention.
Yeah.
Ah,
Nice.
So good deal.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right, and action, right? Almost. He's there. Okay, action!
Thank you.
You guys take care.
Bye.
Thank you. Be careful out there. It is a little slick.
That's a cute shot.
We're gonna let them have their time.
Yeah, I'll wait. That's what I'm kind of hiding. Yep.
And he's filming all this stuff, and I'm like, crap, I'm in the background of the shot.
I know.
Angie, keep moving, so I'm not
And
there.
if you're like one of those people who's like, you don't want your face to
It's like, okay, because I go, great.
Yeah.
How do I
And
look?
so I feel like, yeah, and we're like, I'm super Scandinavian, where I'm just like, you don't want attention drawn to yourself, you know, like.
It's like, oh, please, somebody else in here. How do I, oh.
Yeah.
Oh, shoot.
Well, the coast is clear?
Yeah.
Okay.
There.
Thank you so much
Thanks for
for
coming.
letting us come in. This was awesome. It was a really nice event. And I definitely am going to have to come and visit. Do you do like tours at your orchard?
Oh, yeah, you can come down anytime.
Cool.
Well, we're open.
I'll email you about the cider festival because I know somebody, you know.
Scott may know that because that's more his thing.
Yeah.
I run more the store, he runs the other part, but we're open, it's the third weekend of August that we usually open, and then we're open just weekends through September and October, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
And that makes sense they wouldn't be open year round.
Well, some orchards are.
Okay.
Because they have other stuff going on, but that's...
Do apples 100%.
Well, it was supposed to be a hobby, but it's grown so big that it kind of took over. It started out as just 100 trees and even stopped planting.
Wow, that's so fun.
So we got a little out of hand. But we've got hiking trails down there. It's 124 acres in total. 12 is orchard, 6 is corn maze.
Oh, how
and then,
fun.
And then we have the cider stuff, and you can come down and just sit on the hillside and have some cider.
Yeah, that's really nice. Well, I will definitely come down. Yeah, thank you so much. You have a good night.